This story comes from the Anishinaabe people, one of the largest indigenous nations in North America, with homelands spanning across the Great Lakes region, from Ontario and Manitoba to Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. The Anishinaabe, also known as the Chippewa or Ojibwe, have a rich oral tradition full of legends that connect the spirit world, the land, and the deep lessons of human experience. One such legend tells of a young girl's extraordinary bravery in the face of hardship. It is a tale passed down through generations, rooted in love, sacrifice, and resilience, and it explains the origin of a unique and beautiful flower, the lady slipper, also known by its scientific name, Cypripedium. The lady slipper is a rare and delicate native orchid that grows in cool, forested environments. With its slipper-shaped bloom and vivid pink or white hues, this wildflower is both a botanical marvel and a sacred symbol in many indigenous traditions. The Anishinaabe, in particular, regard it as a gift of remembrance, a bloom that marks a story of courage carved into the very earth. These flowers are slow-growing and difficult to cultivate, often appearing only in untouched woodlands. They rely on a delicate balance of soil, moisture, and specific fungi to survive, much like the harmony between humanity and nature celebrated in Anishinaabe teachings. In some regions, they are now protected due to their rarity and spiritual significance. The story you are about to read is not only the legend of a heroic young girl, but also a reflection of Anishinaabe values: bravery, community, respect for the natural world, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It is a reminder that from the harshest winters and deepest wounds, beauty and healing can still emerge. The sickness came with the first heavy snows of winter, creeping through the village like a silent predator. One by one, the people fell ill. First the children, then the elders. Their bodies racked with fever, their breath labored and weak. Mothers sat beside their little ones, pressing cool cloths to burning foreheads, while the men of the village did what they could to stoke the fires and keep the lodges warm. But warmth alone could not drive the sickness away. Outside, the world was locked in the grip of a fierce and unforgiving winter. The wind howled through the trees like a restless spirit, rattling the longhouses and sending icy fingers of frost creeping across every surface. The river, once flowing and full of life, lay frozen beneath a thick sheet of ice, its surface hidden beneath drifts of wind-blown snow. The sky remained heavy with storm clouds, swallowing what little light the winter sun could offer. The village elders gathered in the largest lodge, their faces lined with worry. They spoke in hushed tones, recalling the wisdom passed down through generations. There was a cure, mashkiki, the sacred healing herb, known to bring strength and restore the body. But it did not grow here. The nearest village held a supply, but it lay on the other side of the great frozen lake, across miles of forested land, where the snow piled knee-deep and the cold bit hard enough to steal a person's breath. No one had attempted the journey in such brutal conditions. The storm winds could strip a traveler to the bone, and the ice, though thick, might crack underfoot. Wolves prowled the shadows of the forest, their bellies empty from the long winter. To set out now meant risking not just discomfort, but death. Yet, if no one made the journey, the sickness would spread unchecked. the villagers were running out of time. The sickness had taken hold of the village, and each day more people succumbed to its grip. Fires burned low as the strongest among them struggled to care for the weak. The elders' voices trembled with worry. No one had stepped forward to retrieve the mashkiki, and time was running out. In one small lodge, a young girl sat beside her little brother, watching his chest rise and fall in weak, uneven breaths. Her mother, weary and pale, dabbed his forehead with a damp cloth. Her eyes filled with helpless sorrow. The girl clenched her fists. She could not sit idly by while her family and her people suffered. Summoning her courage, she stood before the council of elders. "I will go," she said firmly, her voice steady, despite the fear curling in her belly. Murmurs filled the lodge. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, and her parents stepped forward, shaking their heads.
"It is too dangerous,"
her father said, his voice rough with worry.
"The storm is fierce, and the cold will steal the breath from your lungs."
Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears.
"You are only a child,"
she whispered, gripping her daughter's hands tightly.
"If you do not return, we will have lost you too."
But the girl did not waver. "If no one goes, we will all be lost," she said. "The spirits will guide me." The elders, wise in their years, saw the fire in her heart. They knew she spoke the truth. With heavy hearts, they gave their blessing, knowing she was their only hope. Her mother wrapped her in the warmest furs they had, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Her father gave her his own mittens, thick with age and love. She lined her moccasins with soft rabbit fur, hoping it would keep the biting cold from her feet. As the wind howled through the village like a ghostly warning, she stepped out into the blizzard. Snowflakes swirled around her, the darkness of the night pressing in. But she did not look back. With each step, she moved forward, determined to reach the healing herb and return before it was too late. The night swallowed her as she left the village behind, the warm glow of the lodges quickly disappearing into the swirling snow. The wind howled like a great beast, lashing against her face and stinging her skin like needles. Snowflakes thick as down fell in endless waves, blinding her, erasing the world into a vast, white emptiness. She pulled her furs tighter around her, but the cold found its way through every seam, biting at her fingers and numbing her toes despite the rabbit fur lining her moccasins. Each breath came in ragged gasps, the air so sharp it burned her lungs. The snow reached her knees in places, slowing her, but she pressed on, her mind fixed on the ones she loved, their weak voices, their fevered skin. She could not turn back. Hours passed, though she could no longer tell how many. The land stretched endlessly before her, a frozen wilderness of skeletal trees weighed down by ice, their branches cracking like brittle bones in the wind. Then she came to the great frozen lake. It stretched out before her like a sheet of black glass, its surface slick and untrustworthy. She hesitated at the edge, listening to the eerie silence beneath the storm. The ice groaned, shifting with the unseen currents below. She knew the lake was deep, deeper than any man had measured. If the ice gave way, she would be swallowed whole. Steeling herself, she took a careful step forward. The ice held. Another step, then another. She moved slowly, her heart pounding with each movement. The wind howled across the open lake, tearing at her furs and pushing against her as if the spirits themselves sought to turn her back. The cold seeped through the soles of her moccasins, numbing her feet, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself forward. A loud crack split the air. She froze, breath hitching. The ice beneath her shuddered. For a terrifying moment, she thought she would fall, but the crack did not widen. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to move again. She thought of her mother's worried eyes, her father's trembling hands as he gave her his mittens. She thought of her little brother, burning with fever, waiting for her return. Her determination burned hotter than the cold that tried to steal her strength. Step by step, she made her way across the lake. By the time her feet touched solid ground once more, tears of relief froze against her cheeks. She had made it. She had to keep going. By the time the first faint lights of the neighboring village appeared through the white blur of the storm, the girl's legs trembled beneath her. Her breath came in harsh, shallow gasps, each one laced with the sting of cold air. Snow clung to her lashes and hair like a second skin, and her moccasins, once warm with rabbit fur, were soaked through and stiff with ice. But in her heart, she carried the faces of her people, the sick children, the coughing elders, her mother's worried eyes. That memory alone kept her from collapsing into the snow. When she stumbled into the village's outer clearing, a watchful elder saw her form approaching, like a ghost rising from the snow. He cried out, and soon others emerged from their lodges. Voices filled the air, some in concern, others in awe. They helped her down from the final hill, lifting her gently and wrapping her in thick furs. She could barely speak, but when they asked who she was and why she had come alone in the storm, she whispered one word through chattering teeth: Mash-Kiki. The villagers brought her to the main lodge, where a great fire roared at the center, casting flickering shadows on the bark walls. The smell of cedar smoke, herbs, and warm food filled the air, making her feel faint with hunger. Someone pressed a carved wooden bowl of hot broth into her hands, and she sipped slowly, the heat bringing tears to her eyes. Still shivering, she curled beside the fire, and a woman sat behind her, brushing the frost from her hair with gentle fingers. Soon the village healer entered, a woman of strong presence, with long silver-streaked braids and eyes that seemed to know every sorrow of the earth. She knelt beside the girl, cupped her face in warm hands, and listened as the girl explained her village's illness. Her voice was quiet, but every word carried the urgency of a drumbeat in the healer's chest.
You crossed the lake in this storm?
The healer asked, astonished. The girl nodded. There was no time to wait. They need the medicine now. The healer stood slowly and spoke to those gathered.
Mash-Kiki must be given. Her people suffer, and she has come alone to carry hope through the snow. She carries the strength of her ancestors.
Others nodded solemnly, some whispering prayers. The healer went to her stores and returned with a bundle of the sacred herb, carefully wrapped in birch bark and tied with red thread. She placed it in the girl's hands as though handing over a flame.
Rest now,
the healer urged.
The storm will ease by morning. You must not face the wind again so soon.
The girl's eyes burned with unshed tears. She looked down at the bundle, then back to the door. If I rest, they may not survive the night. I must go now. There was a long silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant wail of the wind outside. At last, the healer nodded.
Then we will not stop you. You walk with the spirits now. They will guide your steps.
The villagers watched, some with tears in their eyes, as she stepped back into the night, small and determined, with only the glow of the fire behind her and a bundle of healing against her heart. As the lodge door closed gently behind her, one child whispered to his mother,
"She is like the wind spirit, brave and wild."
And out in the snow, the girl began her return journey, not as the frightened child who had set out, but as a bearer of life, walking not only for her people, but for every future child who would someday see the flower that would bloom where her courage touched the earth. The village was still, wrapped in the quiet hush of slumber and snowfall. The girl stood at the edge of the warm firelight, clutching the bundle of mashkiki tightly to her chest. Behind her, gentle voices had urged her to stay until morning, but she had only shaken her head. There was no time. Her people were suffering. Every breath delayed was a moment stolen from someone she loved. She stepped into the storm. The wind greeted her like an old foe, sharp and merciless. It howled across the trees and clawed at her skin. The snow was deeper now, and the path she'd once carved had vanished beneath fresh drifts. Her body ached from the earlier journey, her limbs sluggish with cold and fatigue. But her spirit was unshaken. She moved forward, step by heavy step, the sacred medicine cradled in her arms like a heartbeat. The lake came into view again, glinting faintly in the moonlight. The ice groaned beneath her weight as she crossed it once more, but she moved without fear. Each step brought her closer to home, closer to saving lives. And then it happened. Her moccasins, soaked and frozen, slipped loose. One was torn away by the wind, the other lost in a drift. She dropped to her knees, searching frantically, but the snow swallowed them whole. There was no time to mourn them. With a trembling breath, she rose barefoot now and pressed forward. The ice beneath her feet was jagged and cruel. Each step tore at her skin, drawing blood that smeared across the snow behind her. Sharp pain shot up her legs, but she refused to cry out. She welcomed the pain. It reminded her she was still moving, still alive, still carrying hope. Her vision blurred with snowflakes and exhaustion. Her fingers were stiff with cold, barely able to hold the medicine bundle, but she gripped it harder. She saw their faces again, her mother's gentle hands, her brother's laughter, the elders' weary eyes. They were counting on her. With each gasping breath, she whispered prayers to the Great Spirit, to the ancestors, to the spirits of the land. The wind roared louder, but she kept walking. She would not let go. She would not fall. The sky began to shift, the deepest black giving way to the faintest gray. Dawn was coming. Just beyond the trees, her village waited. She could almost hear its heartbeat beneath the snow, the quiet pulse of life holding on, waiting for her return. And so she walked, barefoot, bleeding, nearly broken, but never afraid, because within her small frame beat the heart of a warrior. and within her trembling hands, she carried the cure. The sky, once black with storm, now held the faint blush of morning. Frost clung to every branch and rooftop, and the world was hushed beneath a thick blanket of snow. But through the silent white, a single set of footprints marked a path, red-tinged where blood had touched the earth, leading straight to the village. A watchful elder, standing guard by the central fire, was the first to see her, barely more than a shadow at first, swaying, faltering, but still moving. His eyes widened as he raised the cry, "She returns!" The girl returns. From every snow-covered lodge, villagers emerged, sick and well alike, wrapped in furs and blankets. Faces peered out with disbelief and hope. Could it be? Had she truly made it back? And there she was. Her body trembled with each step, every muscle screaming for rest. Her cheeks were raw, her hair crusted with snow. Her moccasins were gone, but in her arms she cradled the sacred mashkiki, the healing herb that might save them all. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as her mother ran to her, arms outstretched. The girl collapsed into her embrace, barely conscious, whispering only, "I have it." With care and reverence, the villagers carried her into the longhouse. The elders gathered quickly, taking the bundle of herbs with shaking hands. Prayers rose immediately as they began the sacred preparation. Grinding, steeping, stirring with ancient songs passed down through generations. As the healing steam filled the air, the girl lay wrapped in soft furs, her breathing shallow but steady. Her father placed a hand on her forehead, whispering words of pride and love. Others wept quietly, some knelt beside her to offer thanks, and many simply sat in silence, unable to speak through their awe. Then, one by one, the sick were brought forward. The elders administered the medicine with care, first to the children, then the elders, and finally to the rest. All eyes watched for signs, a lessening of fever, a return of color, a softening of pain. Hours passed. The fire burned bright, and then the miracle began. A child who had not opened his eyes in days sat up and reached for his mother. An elder's cough softened, his breathing steadied. A young woman rose to her feet, swaying but no longer fevered. It was as if the very breath of life had returned to them on the girl's footsteps. Joy erupted like spring thaw. The village sang that night, not songs of sorrow, but of gratitude, of honor, of the unbreakable strength of one brave soul. In the center of the village, they built a new fire, bigger than any seen that winter. Around it, they gathered in furs and blankets, placing food and gifts as offerings, not just to the spirits, but to the girl who had become legend in her own time. Children danced around her, painting her feet with red ochre and white ash, symbols of sacrifice and rebirth. Her name was whispered with reverence, she who brings life, Stormwalker, daughter of snow and flame. That night, as stars blanketed the sky and the snow fell gently once more, the girl rested surrounded by her people. She had not sought glory, only healing, but in her courage, she had become both healer and hero. And though scars would mark her feet for the rest of her days, the path she carved with pain and love would never be forgotten. As life stirred once more in the village, something extraordinary began to happen beyond its borders. Where once there had been only a trail of snow and suffering. Small green shoots pushed bravely through the earth, fragile but filled with promise. No one knew at first what they were, but soon they bloomed. Lady slippers, delicate curved blossoms the color of dawn, soft pinks and gentle whites, shaped like the moccasins the girl had lost in the snow. The first to see them was a child gathering kindling near the forest's edge. She cried out for the others, and soon the entire village gathered in wonder, staring in silence at the trail of blossoms leading into the woods. The elders fell quiet, their hearts full. They knew what they were seeing. These flowers were more than just a beautiful sight. They were a sign that the earth had not forgotten, that the girl's bravery had been witnessed not just by her people, but by the spirit of the land itself. The trail of Lady Slippers followed the very path she had taken, blooming in each place her bleeding feet had touched. They grew not from seeds, but from sacrifice, from courage, love, and pain. It was as if the land had marked her passage with blossoms as a way to remember her journey and to ensure that it would never be forgotten. The people wept and gave thanks. They declared the trail sacred, a living story etched into the forest floor. Each year, when the flowers returned with spring, the village gathered to honor the girl who had saved them. They told her story to the young, passing down her name and her courage like a torch from one heart to the next. They sang songs that spoke of the long night she endured, the snowstorm she battled, and the soft strength that carried her when her body nearly failed. They danced by firelight and planted healing herbs in her memory. Mashkiki, the sacred gift she had risked everything to bring home. And the girl, now a young woman, would walk that path in springtime, quietly, thoughtfully, her bare feet touching the soil not in pain, but in peace. She traced the steps she had once taken in desperation and love, now softened by petals. She would kneel among the blooms, run her fingers along the edges of their delicate forms, and feel the warmth of the sun on her face. She never boasted of what she had done. She never claimed to be a hero, but the earth had remembered for her, and in that she found comfort. Some said the Lady Slippers were a miracle. Others believed they were a message from the spirits, thanking her for choosing love over fear. Whatever their origin, they remained, year after year, blooming faithfully like a promise, a reminder that courage can bloom from pain and beauty can rise from even the coldest winter. And so, long after the girl had grown and her story had become legend, the trail of Lady Slippers still bloomed in the spring, soft and wild, untouched by time, a path of petals where a heart once walked, carrying the hope of a village on bloodied feet.